build and dig out those new reservoirs that will catch the rain so there's a supply of water in the drier periods.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I understand the points the Secretary of State makes about the levels of pollution and damage to our natural world and environment by the water industry over the past 30 years. And I understand the need for regulation. But does he not understand that he hasn't dealt with a fundamental problem, which is that in the future there's still going to be private enterprise making money out of a public water supply? Wouldn't it be better to bring it into public ownership and set a share price based on the costs of pollution, the executive pay that's been exorbitant and the bonuses that have been exorbitant, so that the public as a whole control their water supply and we're no longer left to the vagaries of the private sector and all the devastation and damage they've caused over the past 30 years?
Secretary of State.
I thank him for his question. This government is going to do what works than what is ideologically correct. We are not going to strip £100 billion out of public services like the National Health Service to give it to the owners of the water companies who have polluted our waterways. We're not going to wait years to get investment in while pollution in our waterways gets even worse. And we are not going to let the pipes deteriorate to such an extent that bill payers would then be hit with even higher bills in the future. I'm going to act in the way that will deliver us lower bills and clean water in the fastest way possible.
Clive Efford.
Mr Deputy Speaker, what's happened to our waterways is a national disgrace, and the state that the Conservatives left our rivers, our lakes and the seas around Britain, it really epitomised what they did to public services in general. But does my right honourable friend agree with me that what's been lacking over the last 35 years of privatisation is a proper consumer representative that's actually protected the customers? And will he give it a guarantee that that will be front and centre of the new regulator?
Secretary of State.
I think he makes a very important point, and in Sir John Cunliffe's final report today, he does make recommendations for how customers can be put at the heart of the new model. There are several recommendations. I won't go through all of them, but one of them is to set up these new regional entities where customers will have direct representation in taking decisions about how water infrastructure investment will be spent to tackle the priorities that they have in their own areas.
Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. My constituent campaigners at Safe Haven and Tewkesbury Friends of the Earth will be delighted to see that at length the government has implemented a core Liberal Democrat manifesto pledge in the abolition of Ofwat. Will he now go further and implement a second pledge, put those campaigners on the board of Severn Trent so that they can hold the water company to account and continue to show my constituents that Liberal Democrat pressure pays off?
Secretary of State.
Well, I do welcome the Liberal Democrats' conversion because, of course, when they were in government and when the Water Minister was indeed a Liberal Democrat, they commissioned a report that found there was no need to change the model of regulation.
John MacDonald.
Can I just say that many people will find it incredulous that Cunliffe was not even allowed to look at public ownership. And can I also say to him mildly that the $100 billion he cites has largely been refuted by independent bodies and economists. But can I raise this issue with him? Way back in 2014, I raised the example of Northumbrian Water and the use of various complicated devices for tax avoidance. And that became endemic within the industry. Could we have a report on the water company's role in tax avoidance on this massive scale, that we can then look at what further action can be taken against them?
Secretary of State.
Well, I agree with him on one point, that we should be cracking down on tax avoidance, and it's always worth looking into that. But on his earlier point, I'm much more interested in the purity of our water than the purity of our ideology. The figure of £100 billion as the cost of buying out the water companies, if any government wanted to nationalise them, was provided by officials in my department with no external influence on them. This country cannot afford it, and we also can't afford the worsening of sewage in our waterways during the years it would take to unpick the current model of ownership.
Dr Andrew Murison.
The Minister said he wanted 9 more reservoirs. Can you say how many of that number are reservoirs already under construction or in the planning process, when we can expect to see them, and who will pay, And is it his view that Sir John Cunliffe's uplift of more than 30% in real terms for water payers' bill will be covering the cost?
Secretary of State.
I'll be more than happy to write to him with the details he is asking for, but as I've said earlier, we're also speeding up the planning process, treating reservoirs as nationally significant infrastructure, so that I, as the Secretary of State, will take the consenting decision so we can do it in months rather than the years or even decades it's been taking up till now.
Alison Gardner.
The village of Upper Team frequently suffers flooding and sewage outflows. One of the reasons is that the antiquated mains water infrastructure cannot adequately cope with the increased amount of new housing developments, even when the developer meets all the required mitigations. Recommendation 3 in the report states that a comprehensive systems planning framework should be introduced and consider regional spatial development priorities that may impact the water system, such as housing developments. Does the Minister agree with me that with the government's plan to build 1.5 million homes, it is vital that privatised water companies ensure that they can adequately meet systems demands without sewage dumping, prioritising this over profiteering?
She makes a very important point because, of course, water infrastructure is critical for housing development, economic development and economic growth in every single region of the country. I've accepted in principle today one of Sir John's recommendations that will allow us to align for the first time water infrastructure investment and spatial planning so that those homes and factories can be built faster to the benefit of local people.
Victoria Collins.
Speaker, I very much welcome the proposals and the announcement today as a step forward of tackling the sewage crisis, but of course the details will be in the delivery, and that's where the importance is, especially as in Harpenden and Berkhamsted, the River Vere, a precious chalk stream, has had nearly 5,000 hours of sewage in the last year. Some of that was 3,000 hours non-stop. Now, we don't know the volume, but we know it's terrible. Will the Secretary of State meet with me to see how the proposals put forward can help prioritise the upgrade of this Mark 8 sewage works that is desperately needed? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Thank you for a question, and I know the River Vere very well because I used to walk over a bridge, cross it every day on my way to school while I was growing up. I would be very happy to make sure that she has an appropriate meeting with the Minister to discuss her concerns.
Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I was very pleased to see that today's report, I believe, has got a picture of the Bingley Five Rise locks in my constituency on the front cover, so thank you for that. The creaking and leaking water infrastructure, the current drought restrictions and sewage dumping in our rivers, like the Aire and Wharf, are evidence of a failing industry. And indeed the failures of previous Tory water ministers sitting on the front bench. I do welcome today's report.